Here's a little clip regarding how I've been making this fairy house. Actually, it's a Hobbit house for the garden, and working on it right now inside my greenhouse, in which I'm using a rock cutter in which I can slice up different pieces of rock that I've got, and I can actually make small little pieces of like masonry for the entrance to the Hobbit house. And so here is the doorway. It's been attached. The actual Hobbit house itself, it was an actual piece of bark off of a tree that had a large knot on the side of it. So just created a window, kind of curved it in different curvatures that will go around some of the rock that I have down the steps leading down from our greenhouse here. So it's going to be kind of attached to the steps, and so it'll be curving and kind of shaping itself with the lay of the land down there. So as I'm attaching the actual little stones here that have been sliced on the rock cutter, I've been using this from a hardware store, this Power Grab, kind of a clear, crystal clear. It says it's a very high-powered glue that's basically like a silicone-based type glue that's waterproof and everything. I'm not sure if it's silicone actually. It just says it's durable in all conditions. And so we can put it outside and it'll glue out any surfaces from wood to rock to masonry, whatever. So I'm applying the little pieces that have been cut here on the rock saw. And it's kind of a wet environment because it has a very small reservoir of water that basically keeps everything lubricated. So as you cut small pieces, here's another doorway I'm going to be working on for another little Hobbit house, but I'm making some little pieces. This is actually some nice marble right here. And so I'll cut it up in pieces. If you can find some little pieces, reject pieces of different kinds of stone people may use for making their countertops. This is basically a darker colored quartz. I just sliced it up last night. And then I'm cutting it into little wedges like that right there that will be able to go. And then I can measure them out to measure the width of the actual the door frame that I've made to hold the hinge and hold the actual Hobbit door, the round door, which is basically a limb cut from a tree, sliced nicely on a power saw. So this is some of the process we're doing, making some of our fairy houses, whether they're going to be kind of the shape of a Hobbit house or other types of interesting houses. I'll have more clips. Several weeks since I posted or actually made a video of my progress I've been making on the actual fairy house, that the Hobbit house. It's going to be put into a side of the hill that I have coming up to my greenhouse. And so I finished up the rock that I had basically cut and glued into place around the doorway to the Hobbit house with the hinge, and actually added a little bit of an actual structure there to make it look like it was made that way. And actually I've added on top of the structure, it has a piece of plywood on the top to kind of hold all of this together. I added a piece of stone right here that's been screwed into place, and so the actual rooftop has been put in there. And on the end of the actual form that I have, it's actually formed out of a piece of bark, and I created a little bit more of a structure underneath there so it'll hold it all together, and put a piece of plywood on the end and added a little Hobbit window down there, and rocked in some of this little small cobble rock, and actually cut them in such a way so they would fit together and be flat on one side so I could glue them onto the end in the whole process. One of the things I'm trying to do is also I'm trying to be able to hold it in place once I put it into the ground. So I added onto the end an actual piece of rebar so that it will be able to be impaled into the ground and hold it in place. And so in the place of the side of the hill, it'll be held and won't be wobbly. And it's kind of top heavy right now because of the rock, the rooftop. That will be covered with moss eventually. But that's how it's all put together. And so there's an interior inside of it, so it looks like there's an inside of the house. On the inside, it add a few extra little homey things, kind of like a little table with maybe a lamp in there with a few books, and maybe a window or something on the side. Also a little picture on the back. So all of this is coming together, and at this point what I'm going to be doing, I'm going to be adding on a little eave, a little cornice on top of the actual entrance to the house. So it'll have a very small, kind of a small gable sticking out with maybe some support. This is all driftwood found on the beach, everything like this, and the bark. I made the stones. Everything's been handmade other than the rebar, but I'm going to be adding that on there too. So I'll be giving some more videos about this in a little bit. So here's the work that I've done on the Hobbit house, which is a tiny fairy house that's going to be in our village. And I finished the cornice, finished the top gable and the brackets that hold it in place, and we'll be able to install it here in a few minutes. So I have put the Hobbit House into the ground, and now I'm beginning to work on the rocking that's going to be hold it in place here. So it's actually contoured and snugged up against the boulders that are part of the contour of going up into the greenhouse area and all the stone steps here. So the process, in order to hold it in place, is I glue these little rocks to kind of seal off the edges and the areas where it meets the rock. And so it'll kind of be water resistant also in the winter months. I'm going to go ahead and glue in with this really high-powered glue that I've been using all along, and I got at the hardware store. And so I'm going to go ahead and put this in, and after I get it all cobbled in, rocked in, I'll go ahead and put the actual, the porch or the steps that will lead up into the doorway of the Hobbit House. And so it's a little slow process of getting the rocks to fit just right. I may have to trim off a little bit on them so they fit perfectly using my rock saw up in the greenhouse. And I'm going to go ahead and keep putting them in there and filling in the crevices in the areas. I did clamp it to the support post here that leads up the stairs, and so I actually hold it in place, so as it dries and the glue solidifies, it's going to hold it in place like that. So after a few hours of work in applying different rocks and gluing them in place at the base of the Hobbit House, I have finished putting it in place, and at this point I'm going to go ahead and call it good for a while. I do want to add probably a stone or rocked chimney on the top of it, and then I'll begin working on the other fairy houses to the left and up above it on the plateau up above it. So at this point it's all rocked in, the veneered, the steps are in place, and the entrance is ready. Then we'll do some other decorations out front, maybe a little hobbit type of fence that goes around some steps that lead down from the upper plateau and some other areas, and probably create some more ladders or other steps that go up to other areas. So there's going to be like a tree house over here. This root I have here, I'm going to probably level it off the top and probably put a few little houses up on top of it, so it'll be another tree house and probably another tree house up in the area. So that's the Hobbit House I've made in the fairy garden here, the fairy village, and we'll have a lot more videos about the different various houses I've made and all the other kind of gnome looking rooftops I've been making. One of the things I've found is really handy is I've been able to go to different Goodwill places or thrift stores and finding the cornucopia type baskets, and those work really well when you're putting shingles on the houses like that. So have fun making your own villages or your own little outside garden decorations or fairy villages. If you're interested in that, my 2-year-old granddaughter will really love it.